Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, I've got a couple of very special guests. A good friend of mine, Tatiana. We've been talking off and on behind the scenes for quite a while now. And I reconnected with her, and she actually told me that she founded a startup dealing with agents. And so rather than waste too much of your time with me rambling, Tatiana, what is an agent in your own words?
Yeah. So AI agents, everybody's talking about them. I think a lot of people are confused about what they are. I think the best way to think about an AI agent is that it is like a worker. So it's basically like a human worker that has two things, right? It has the ability to interact with other employees. So, it's not really useful for you to hire a worker and not be able to interact with it or get feedback from it or give it instructions or get its feedback, right? So it has to have some sort of interaction modality, right? People call that a chatbot, but it's really an interaction modality. And then the next piece of the agent, again, like a human worker, is that you can train it, give it access to your systems, and have it take action on its own. Right. So the reason that they're called AI agents is two reasons, is because first of all, it's an agent in the context of the principal agent problem, right? You, the, human employee are the principal, and you've got this agent, right, that has all the capabilities that a human worker would have, but it works for you. Okay. So you have to be able to give it good instructions, right? Because you get back into like, you're the principal, that's the agent. You have to be able to give it good instructions. You need to be able to communicate with it. The other piece of agent is the word agency. So it has the ability to make decisions on its own and generate new insights. And that is actually why LLMs and this new type of AI technology is really breakthrough in how computer systems and how we interact with computer systems, because they actually are able to produce new insights, be able to create new decisions, be able to generate new recommendations on their own, and have some form of agency as opposed to humans programming every step. Right. So that is where the turn to AI agents really is. And anytime you think about implementing an agent, make sure that you have both of those capabilities, both the ability to interact with it and really communicate with it in a robust way, as well as give it the opportunity to take action on its own based on its decision making.
Excellent. Yeah, so at a very high level, the company that you and Chad founded, that you created,
Mhm.
Wayfound AI, can you give us just a super high level, like what is your value prop, like, and then we'll dive into like what are you seeing out there, like what problems are you solving, and what need are you really kind of finding in the enterprise space or in your customer base?
Yeah. So I think a lot of us have heard that there's a disillusion. We're in the trough of disillusionment, right? With AI, generative AI, and especially AI agents. And this is because a lot of the early adopters who started investing a lot in this technology thought that they were getting full-fledged expert workers. But what they actually got were these, smart, but really naive interns that made a lot of mistakes. And so what was needed and what is needed is a platform to help to really onboard, train, manage, and supervise, as well as give feedback, right, to these nascent AI interns to make them into better and better workers. So it's one thing to build an AI system, a generative AI system. It's another thing to actually be able to supervise it and manage it so that it becomes robust, reliable, and you can trust, right, it as an operating feature, especially if you're putting it out to customers, which is where the real value creation is going to happen. Like, let's just be real. Like, cutting costs, right, in terms of customer service. No company has ever won in an age of technical disruption because they've done cost cutting better, right? Where this game is actually going to be played is in putting out new customer experiences that are going to be transformational. And for that, you need to trust this technology and trust this intelligence. So Wayfound was created, and our motto is trust and intelligence, because what we really believe is that we need to have a platform where you can not just build AI agents, which you can do on Wayfound. But the more important piece of Wayfound is the ability to onboard, align, train, supervise, monitor, and give feedback to your agents so that you can really comfortably trust them and rely on them for business critical operations, especially customer facing experiences and operations.
That is what we talked about before. And so what I want to do is like unpack one of the things that you said, because it's like people were hoping for, what they were sold is like you're going to have, an expert, someone with 5 years of experience or more. And we don't have to like get into definitions of AGI, but like comparing what these models can do today, and the word that you used was you basically get an intern. And that reminds me of what some other people have said, where AI is basically at the level of a smart high schooler. So it's like intern, smart high schooler. I think we're kind of building consensus that is the level of intelligence we're working with. But then I think what is even more salient is you were talking about it's not necessarily just, labor replacement. You're not just substituting AI for a human, at least not in all cases, but really we're talking about creative disruption where there's fundamentally new capabilities. And we talked a lot about that last time. So Tatiana, do you want to jump into that, or Chad, do you want to talk about like that kind of those new fundamental capabilities, that mind shift that has to be adopted to understand where value can be created with these new platforms?
Sure, I'll jump in. So I do think, like, you're correct, right? We're obviously on a journey with AI here. Like, people keep forgetting it's only been a year and a half, or a little bit more than that, since ChatGPT dropped on the scene. So people got a little bit ahead of their skis, for one thing. These tools are incredibly powerful, like as is right now. They're getting more so. I think everyone agrees, like, we're on a pretty strong trajectory towards probably passing intern relatively soon, getting more to college graduate level. I'm hearing PhD within a year or 2 years, right? We'll have a billion PhDs out there doing automated research, which could be pretty amazing. But kind of where we focus right now is just getting businesses to even be able to try these things out and deploy them in a way that is safe, reliable, repeatable, auditable, right? Like that they can actually put out in front of customers and not have it hallucinate too much or deviate too much from what they're trying to get it to, its main task that they're sort of deploying it for. So that's where all the customers we're dealing with right now are not trying to use these to replace people. They're literally trying to create, as Tatiana said, new experiences, new ways to bring in customers, new ways to upsell products to existing customers, increase usage of existing products in a way that they just can't scale with humans, right? So I think a good example is if you've got a customer support team of 10 people, you're going to drop things on the floor, right? They're just customers. If you've got thousands of customers, there are people that are just not going to get attention and love from you, right? So at least now with AI, you can address sort of that tail end of your customer base that would never be elevated up to an actual person, right? So I think that's a good example of sort of how we're blending these things together with humans right now. And yeah, that's sort of more what we're seeing.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
So I was just going to kind of follow up on this kind of move to efficiency versus new customer experiences, right? As Chad said, like, I think that we really need to understand that if we believe that this is a big technological shift that's happening, that where the game needs to be played is actually to see what customers are not being served well, and how do we actually create new experiences to give them something that they didn't have before, as opposed to just doing the same thing at lower cost. Like, it's like as if when we created the combustion engine, people created better ways to feed and water their horses with combustion engines as opposed to building cars. You know what I mean? Like, it's very silly to me that the questions that people have right now is, how do we use AI agents to do exactly the same things that we're doing right now for a lower cost, as opposed to, what Chad said, which is, hey, what are the customers that are not being served right now? And how do we actually create new experiences for them that we weren't able to create before? Or what are the new absolutely breakthrough ways that we can go to market with our products, right? And what are the new products we can develop, right, with this technology? That is actually the companies who do that, again, that build the cars as opposed to the combustible engine horse feeders are going to be the ones that win. And I know that's a weird analogy, but just think about, right, what happened. Like the reason why, like in the 1990s, right, Walmart was definitely going to win and they kept cutting costs. But the company that actually won was the one that was not the lower cost provider. It was Amazon. It was the company that created a completely new customer experience. We need to get that thinking back, right, when we think about AI. And in order to do that, and when I see, and what Chad and I see, is a lot of companies don't trust the intelligence enough to actually be creating new customer facing products. And so a platform like Wayfound helps companies really give the observability, the monitoring, the feedback, right? All of the tools to really understand what their AI agents are doing and to develop and build trust in this technology so that they can innovate on those new product experiences. And that's what our customers are primarily doing with Wayfound.
Excellent. That reminds me of, I don't know if this is a real quotation, but Henry Ford allegedly said, if I just listened to my customers, I would have made a faster horse. But yeah, it achieved the same result, or like you said, new experiences, but with a fundamentally different approach. And that's really kind of what we're starting to see. So I have there's kind of two avenues that I want to talk about, and it might actually be the same conversation. So one is, Chad, just before we hit record, you mentioned that there was at the advent, you had the Chat GPT moment, and you saw that there was going to be a lot of barriers for getting this enterprise ready. Right. There's conversations that I've had with other startup folks and people advising government and big business like Fortune 500. It's just there's a whole lot of unsexy enterprise stuff, security, compliance, auditing, observability, those sorts of things. So that's one component of what I want to talk about, which is like, what is the friction that you're seeing out there? Because again, like, even if we had PhD level models tomorrow, it's still going to take a while to implement and integrate safely and effectively. And then the second component, and again, this may or may not be a related conversation, is the Javons Paradox, which is you lower the cost, the utility you lower the cost of something while either maintaining the utility or increasing the utility, and usage paradoxically goes up. So it violates supply and demand economics. And that's something that I'm seeing more and more people talk about across various industries where AI is actually making it more efficient and therefore usage is going up because it actually expands the addressable market. At least that's one way of looking at it. So let's take that in whichever order you want. Like, what is it going to take to make it enterprise ready? What were the needs that you were seeing, a year and a half ago when you said, hey, I see the problems that are going to need to be solved. And then what is that doing to kind of the market forces and market dynamics and jobs and, Javons Paradox kind of stuff?
Sure. So I spent about 6 years working at Box, helping build essentially their platform business back in 2013, 15. So essentially talking to Aaron and the folks there, they lived through the cloud adoption phase, kind of from the very start to, well, they're still going, obviously, right? And it reminded me a lot of that when I saw ChatGPT, right? I was like, wow, this is amazing technology. This is a no-brainer going forward. Everyone's going to use this. Applications are going to be rebuilt from the ground up over time. But it just reminded me a lot of the early cloud adoption phases. So I met with a lot of customers helping build Box Platform. We'd walk into CTO's office at a giant insurance company in the Northeast or something, and they're like, there's no way in hell we're moving all of our documents to the cloud. It's not secure. You're going to get hacked. That's crazy. It's too expensive. Why would we do that? We've got all this infrastructure in place already. Fast forward 10 years, I think most of them have kind of changed their mind on that, right? So I think we're going to go through the same thing with AI. So as soon as I saw it, I'm like, awesome technology, basically has none of the entrappings that you need to actually deploy this thing within a business, right? So all the stuff that we had to build at Box around the admin controls, the auditability, compliance, like all of the various rules or regulations you have to adhere to around the world. It's kind of funny, like every conference room at Box headquarters was named after a feature that they added, like SOC 2 and OAuth 2 and It was literally like everything they had to build along the way to actually close a deal. So all the battle scars, what they went through, and we're talking hundreds of conference rooms, right? So I think we're going to go through the same thing. It immediately struck me. I started building Wayfound, and I'm like, hey, how would you actually package up this incredible technology in a way that businesses could actually use it, where CISOs are not going to freak out, where there's everything that they need. It's going to take a long time. It's going to be a multi-year process, but it's going to be required. So we just started building towards that. So that's kind of to address that question. To your second question, yeah, I mean, what did we just go through last week, right, with GPT 4.0 Mini? We were leveraging for a lot of our workloads 4.0. So we just experienced a 97% cost reduction in our cost of goods sold in terms of tokens, right? That's pretty amazing. So I think things like that, I think Sam Altman tweeted something about unmetered intelligence last week, right? Once you start getting to that, I do think you're correct, right? When we've got intelligence networks springing up, when the cost of intelligence essentially goes to zero, which basically we saw a year and a half ago in terms of our predictions of where this was going to go, I think it's going to be incredible. Like, this is where we're going to get massive network effects, agents calling agents, interacting with multiple systems, sort of in real time, not worrying about nickel and diming customers, like, hey, can we really deploy this at scale? It's going to cost $10,000 a month. Well, no, it won't cost $10,000 a month, at least in terms of the AI. It costs about 97% less than that. So yeah, I think we're at a major inflection point, even just as of this week for that.
What do you think about open source versus closed source? And I don't mean necessarily from a safety perspective, because that's a whole other debate. But, Meta just released their 405 billion parameter model open source, and it's not eclipsing these closed source models, but I mean, some of these closed source models are ludicrously expensive. And what I kind of see is this commodification, and if you disagree, I'm happy to hear any pushback. But I remember, server technology, operating system technology, what tends to happen over time is as these technologies mature, they just become, you buy something off the shelf or download it off the shelf. So with this cost reduction, that's happening, I don't see the margins panning out for these AI only shops. Like, Meta has a whole bunch of other product offerings. Microsoft has a whole bunch of other product offerings that are just going to be integrated and augmented by this LLM technology and transformer technology. So with cost going down, the margins seem like they're getting worse. Intelligence is going up, and then you have open source versus closed source. So Tatiana, we talked a little bit about that last time, where it's just like, when you and I got started, token counts were measured. It was like 13 cents per 10,000 tokens or something like that. And now it's fractions of a cent per million tokens. So like, what are you guys seeing out there in terms of the economics, just from a business perspective, of the trends that we're seeing, what's available today, and like kind of what do you expect in the next 6 to 12 to 24 months?
I mean, Chad just mentioned that GPT 4.0 Mini, right, is essentially too cheap it's basically intelligence for free, almost free. And the benefits that you get via a managed service versus just open source software you have to think about the total cost of ownership, and you have to think about your risk profile, not just the cost of the actual, model cost, which are, again, OpenAI's really brought that down quite a bit, right? 97% less than their other models. So I think a lot of people are still functioning on old information if they think the closed source models are more expensive than open source. I actually think if you look at the total cost of ownership of what it takes to run and manage and essentially do a lot of the safety, deployment safety work on the the open source models, you'll find that, again, GPT 4.0 Mini is probably much cheaper. That's my supposition, because all the people I know that I've spoken to personally that have taken an open source model to use in an enterprise context have spent millions and millions of dollars on a team to make it production ready. Now, sometimes they fine tune it and do all other kinds of things to it. But if you don't need to do that, I think most companies will find that they're much better off going with a closed source model. Where the friction is right now is not in cost, it is in trust. Where I really see the issues is what Chad said, what Chad mentioned. It is, how do we know that it's safe? How do we know that it's secure? How do I know that it's not, going to that way I have that there's been good deployment safety procedures that have been put in? How do I feel, who's on the hook, right? If the model really goes off the rails, those are really the friction points right now that enterprises have. And I think rightly so, because the top models are going to be, again, almost too cheap to meter. And where they're actually going to make their money is they believe, and their investors, I think, believe that this is going to be such a wide-ranging technology that it'll be like a utility, right? It's the economies of scale are going to be just enormous. So even though it costs a lot to build, a power plant, billions and billions and billions of dollars, just like it costs to build, a model, because it's going to be everywhere and dispersed in so many different elements of our lives. The economies of scale are going to be just gargantuan for the companies that actually deliver on trust. That's the key piece. Just like with power, the problem is trust, not are you getting enough, amps or whatever, or kilowatts, right?
Right.
The problem is, if you're going to build a nuclear power plant, nobody is going to be like freaking out over how many kilowatts you can provide. People are going to be freaking out about your safety measures and your reliability, and can they trust you and their community? And it's going to be a very similar dynamic with intelligence.
That makes sense. One way that I have thought about technology, and just using that utility analogy, it's like people want technology to be like a light switch. You turn the light switch on, it comes on every time. And it, with respect to trust, it's almost as much about what it doesn't do as what it does do, because, like unmetered intelligence, as you're talking about, like that's going to be a given. It's everything else, all the packaging, all the wrapping, all the safety features that keeps the lights on, that prevents it from going off the rails. And then also it sounds like, so just departing from the economics of it, there's it sounds like there's also some concerns around accountability, maybe on a legal level, or liability, financial risk, because at the end of the day, like any enterprise out there, it's going to be a cost benefit analysis, right? In terms of what do we get in terms of top line or bottom line movement versus what is the risk profile. So from your, like what Wayfound is offering, what are some of the use cases that you're seeing in terms of some of those new use cases, those new customer experiences, and also from that risk and cost benefit analysis? Because it's like, here's where I'm coming from. In the cases where technologies create fundamentally new opportunities, it's like, how much would it cost to have a human do that? And if it's not worth it to have a human do it right now, you're basically create your blue ocean expedition, right? You're fishing in unfished waters. So I want to understand, like, how are you finding those opportunities? How are you finding product market fit, and what is the feedback that you're getting from your customers?
Chad, do you want to start there? And I'll...
Yeah, I mean, I think one really interesting thing that that I'm seeing, at least, is this technology is really good at taking in a large amount of information. Like most of what we're dealing with is textual information from several different sources, like way more than a human could fit in their head, sort of in real time to process. And it's able to intertwine all of that information in a comprehensive way, in a way that it can actually answer and interact with a human on the other end, that I don't think would be feasible, especially at scale, right? So an example of this is one of our customers has essentially like a product catalog that's coming from a database in real time. So that's changing all the time. They've got sort of a base level of knowledge of like, what is the space we're in? What do we do? Like, what is sort of the general part of our business that other companies do as well? But it's a thing people want to buy. And then there's the very specific information about one of their customers, right? So like, what products have they bought from this company in the last month? How did it go when they deployed it? What was the reception of these different programs that they were selling, right? And what they're providing is essentially like an ongoing sales tool to their customers, where because they sort of continuously have to renew what programs they're offering. Think of like planting a tree for every laptop that's sold, right? So kind of social good programs. And buyers who are, in their customer base can essentially ask very detailed questions about what programs have we run in the past, what was successful, what have some of our competitors done, what were the outcomes of those, are there any new things? So in real time, the agent can be very customer specific, answer very sort of broad questions, super specific questions, and it can do it 24/7. And you could fire up thousands of them, right? So I think that's a really good example of kind of where we're at right now with the technology meeting like a real business need, and not we don't need AGI to do that, but it's still incredibly powerful. And I would wager you could not do that even 2 years ago.
Yeah, and to build on that, so here's the use case, and it can't be done by humans actually, or it would not be as good done by humans, because so the way that the problem is, hey, our customers want real-time information on what types of social good platforms they should run next, right? So, when a company has, some extra marketing budget, they need to spend it this month, right? Because the quarter is about to close. They've got some extra marketing budget. They want to meet their ESG goal with those marketing dollars. They need a plan now, today. So what used to happen, or what you could say is, well, the person who knows the account really well, right, and that particular customer context needs to go and find the 2 or 3 experts on different marketing plans or approaches. They need to find a time and coordinate with the customer, right, to have a meeting so that all of them can get into the same context, right, and share, what kind of goals they have. And then the team would, take a few days to produce a report, right, for the customer. In our system, you have an agent who's the expert on the customer. It knows all of the background on the customer. It knows all of the different programs that they've run in the past, how successful they have been. It knows all about their customer base. It knows all about their markets. Okay. Then you also have a few expert agents as well, sitting on the sidelines that first agent, that customer agent has access to, right? It has marketing for environmental impact, marketing for social impact in the United States, marketing for social impact, overseas, blah, 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 right? Marketing to help the oceans, right? They have all these experts. So the customer now can go in, and instead of calling their account manager and taking weeks to get this problem solved with the different experts and coordinating humans, they go in, they put in a prompt. This agent understands the context of the customer, calls out to whatever expert agents it needs to access in order to put together the right plan, and returns it back to the customer real time. So that is a completely new customer experience that could not be done as well, even with humans. It's not about saving costs. It's about, it does save costs, right? Because you don't have to employ all these people, but it's much more than that. It's actually providing a completely new customer experience, which is more robust, potentially more accurate, and certainly a lot faster than if you had humans and were employing human experts to put this together, for the customer. So those are the types of things that we're seeing that's possible with this technology. And I know, David, you talked about teams of agents before, right? And that's really where we start to unlock a lot of value, and decrease hallucinations by allowing agents to just be experts in their narrow fields, right? So that they can then work together to solve problems real time. And obviously they do it much faster than teams of humans solving problems together.
Exactly. So let me see if I can encapsulate this, because it really sounds like, from a business perspective, because obviously there's many other contexts in which artificial intelligence will change our life and politics and society and whatever else. But specifically for business, the business context, the true value is not necessarily the ways in which AI is similar to humans, but actually it's the differences. Because Chad, one thing that you said, it's one of the key differences is you've got, 100,000 token context window, 2 million context window, and growing. So the fact that it can read thousands of pages of material that quickly, that is a fundamentally different capability that humans don't have. And that is actually where you're finding a way to exploit this new technology and create some of those new business opportunities. And now that's just one way of packaging it. Is there any other ways that you can kind of articulate that?
I mean, I think that's a key part of it right now, right? It's just the scale of information that these things can deal with at sort of one point in time. Tatiana mentioned also part of what Wayfound lets you do is build a network of intelligence, as I like to call it, where you've got agents that have specific knowledge, they have specific directives, cognitive architecture type thing, right? Where it's like, hey, this is how I think about this information. This is how I present this information. Really, you use the word encapsulate. They kind of encapsulate a specific angle on some body of knowledge. And you can, with a tool like Wayfound, network these things and say, hey, I understand that you know how to answer this question. You're the best thing to answer this question. Please comb through your thousands and thousands of tokens of context and give me the exact specific answer I want for this specific question, right? So I think those are things that have just not been possible up until now. But I do agree with what Tatiana said. It's not that they weren't, the whole doing TCP IP via pigeon, right? It's like, yes, you could do it, right? You could do what we're talking about. It would just be glacially slow, highly error prone, and no one would actually do it, right? So I think that's where I'm really excited about this technology is you can just build completely net new experiences. And I mean, to go back to, 30 minutes ago, like we're really just not having conversations with people about eliminating jobs, replacing people. It's literally building things that you could just not do feasibly before.
Wonderful. I'm reminded, an analogy I like to use is if you gave the Wright brothers a jet engine, they still couldn't have used it because you didn't have the airport infrastructure. You didn't have, the hydraulics to maintain, or even the aerospace engineering to build a jet airliner.
They certainly couldn't have built an airport because you also need air traffic control and you also need instrumentation, right? And that's why Wayfound is building all of those pieces, right? We have the air traffic control, we have the instrumentation, right, to tell you what height you're at, make sure the planes don't crash into each other, and so those are all the things that are actually needed to unlock these capabilities, right? And that's why it's not just about this narrow specific use case. It's about how all the planes are flying together and going in and out of the airport and what the skies look like and who gets to like where's the dashboard, right? Where's literally kind of the map of where all of them are at any particular point in time. So that is actually what Wayfound is.
Excellent. That is, I think that's a great business, just summary of what you guys are offering. So I want to get a little bit more speculative, or maybe not speculative, looking at trends. So obviously, individual agents, that's one thing. But I remember a conversation I had almost 2 years ago now, which is that people realize very quickly these agents are going to spend more time talking to each other than to us eventually, if not already. So let's talk a little bit about network intelligence, what you kind of anticipate in terms of the infrastructure having, I don't know if you call it swarms or fleets of agents, what is, and I know that you don't want to give away the trade secrets, but what are you seeing in terms of implementation or capabilities of the model versus every other layer of the software stack to enable all of these new capabilities?
Yeah, I can address that. So yeah, Wayfound does allow you to create a intelligence network. So you can define a bunch of agents. You can essentially broadcast what they specialize in, like what they know about, basically. And then you can opt in to essentially create a network, right? A bunch of networks, depending on what you're trying to accomplish. There's a lot of aspects to that, right? In terms of the technology to do that. Honestly, kind of similar. I would call it non-groundbreaking in its implementation, but the effect you get by doing this is pretty amazing, right? Now, on the other hand, the ability to understand what's happening in terms of the network is super important. Like you're not going to be able to deploy a swarm of agents inside of a business that have access to APIs that can manipulate data, create records, delete records, like whatever, and have that just be without full understanding of what's happening. So there's a lot of observability that we put into Wayfound in terms of understanding exactly what's happening. That's going to be required at the CISO level. So there's that angle. Then I think the other part of your question, sorry, remind me what the last part of your question was.
Just trends, like as models become more intelligent,
Oh, yeah,
faster,
sorry.
cheaper. Yeah, because like you like just to put a number on it, you can say obviously cost. That's kind of like the bottom line, or like the bottom line up front. How much does the model cost? But then there's also speed of the models, and then new intelligence capabilities. So like, what would you anticipate a year from now? Just as for instance, a year from now, let's imagine that the typical model, cost continues to go down, intelligence continues to go up. What kinds of new capabilities do you think that you'd be able to offer a year from now, potentially?
Yeah, I mean, so the biggest thing I'm seeing right now, or that I'm kind of paying attention to, is what people are referring to as reasoning. So the ability to understand, hey, of the 10 tools or 20 tools that I've been given that the model or agent has been given access to, when and how does it choose to invoke them, right? So a good example is the latest model from Anthropic, right? Actually is able to do what they call sequential tool calling. And an interesting thing that it does is part of what you get back as you're sort of doing an inference loop is they show you like the behind the scenes reasoning that the model is spitting out. So a test example I use is I have an API that knows how to get a list of users, right? And then I have another endpoint that knows how to get details about a user, right? So if you say, how many users do I have? And give me all the details about user 5. The model determines like, oh, I have two tools. One gets me all the users, one gets me details. I don't have any dependencies that I need between them. So just do them both at the same time, right? And both tools are invoked in parallel. You feed the result to the model and it answers the question. If you ask it, how many users do I have? And give me the details of the user with the longest last name, you get a very different thing, right? So you will see the model reason, okay, I need to invoke the tool to get the list of users. I need to then take that data and I need to figure out which user has the longest name. And then I'm going to call the tool that actually goes and gets the user details for whatever ID I've determined, right? And you'll literally see it invoke tools in sequential order. That was pretty crazy when I ended up implementing that. That is something that the current, OpenAI models cannot do, open source models. They can do parallel tool invocation, but not sequential. So we're at the very beginning, I think, of really deep understanding at the model level. And Tatiana and I have been on the same page for a year with this, where, you've got all these workflow tools that are sort of half AI, half old school workflow, where they're spitting out Python code. You're still drawing arrows between things. We've just thought for a long time that's not where this is going. This is going to be, hey, models get much smarter. They understand how to reason. You give them access to a bunch of tools, and they are able, with just a simple like go do X, to figure out exactly what tools to invoke in what order to accomplish it. And you don't have to. We're not programming anymore, basically, at that point.
I'm just going to underline what Chad said, because all of these, the paradigm of telling a computer system what steps in sequential order to invoke is old school programming thinking, right? It's not where generative AI means, again, that we're going to need to trust the intelligence in the system to actually solve the problem without having to constrain exactly what steps to go, because it actually could be, right? Because by constraining the systems, we're actually preventing better outcomes from emerging. That's the other thing that people need to understand, is that the companies that trust in intelligence and feel confident in it are actually going to find new insights, because those new insights are going to be generated. And so what, Chad and our team of engineers has built is the world's first manager model, which supervises all the other agents. Because one of the problems is, okay, if I don't tell it exactly what order to do things in, how do I know that it's doing the right thing? The humans don't have the throughput to monitor and to supervise, right, what all the agents are doing. And so what we have is we have an AI model that monitors and supervises all the other AIs and that has better judgment and better context about the company to be able to then give feedback to all the AI agents that are working. So that is the other piece of this, which I think is groundbreaking because it's the first one ever, kind of put into production for the enterprise context. It's a manager that actually supervises when agents have agency, right, to make better decisions and to reason on their own.
So that reminds me, Tatiana, one of the things that we touched on last time we spoke, you're talking about the importance of culture and surfacing those values and the principles and ethics. And I know that that's what you're referring to here. So one way that I have talked about this in my own capacity consulting is it's more like mission-oriented programming. And I don't know if that's a term that you have used or if that resonates. But how do you integrate those, like the broader business context, and understand or create a system that has those values, those ethics, or the culture of the company, so that you know that the intelligence, you trust the intelligence, but how do your customers know that they've given your manager agent the ability to supervise in alignment with their values and their goals?
Well, we have built in. We're starting to do this by building in what we call global directives. So they are a set of directives that sit over and above any specific agent directives that actually do have the company values, the brand guidelines, and where you can essentially align all of the agents that are being managed on the Wayfound platform to your company culture. As the manager model learns more and more and gets more feedback from humans, right, as it's embedded more in the context of the organization, it will also get through RLHF, right, finer grain understanding of the organizational values in practice based on what people are, not just the directives or the values and the brand guidelines that you've inputted in explicitly, but also starting to infer what are the company values and what are the things that really matter to the company based on employee feedback. So that's another advantage of having that manager model there overseeing all of the agents. And I should also say that the way that Wayfound is constructed is you can build agents on Wayfound. A lot of people are, but you don't have to. You can actually just use Wayfound as the management platform for your agents, or have a mix. You can actually plug some agents into Wayfound through our APIs. You can build others on Wayfound, but they will all be managed based on our manager model and based on our monitoring capabilities, and get all of the advantages of the platform that way.
It always strikes me how fundamentally different, maybe not fundamentally, that might be a little hyperbolic, but how different this paradigm is, because what you're talking about is building the infrastructure to create an organization that doesn't just learn at the human level, it's learning at the system level. And whether it's technical learning or ethical learning or values-based learning. And again, I obviously don't want to have you share any proprietary secrets, trade secrets or anything. But as we're winding down, I want to turn the microphone, hand the microphone over to you guys. We'll start with you, Chad. What is it that you hope to see, that you want to see out there, either in the business space, the broader research community, or just what is it? What are your aspirations, your hopes and dreams for this next couple of years of AI progress?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a large question. Obviously, there's a lot of angles to that. I would say most closely related to kind of this conversation, I definitely think we're going to start experiencing what I would call a global intelligence network, right? So the way that we've built it in Wayfound, these networks do not have to exist just within our own platform. We're actually kicking up something called the Open Agent Alliance this fall. So we're starting to find people that are interested in that, and essentially that is going to be an effort to open these things up and make sure that agents can reach out and communicate with other agents, that we have the means to do observability across these networks. So if you think about it, a CISO at a company might get okay with the notion of, hey, I've got an intelligence network within our business and it's sort of within the four walls of this building. I'm cool with that. I've got everything I need. But how are you going to start leveraging intelligence that exists at another business or at a nonprofit or in a completely different country, right? These things are going to be sort of everywhere around the world, and if you want to win as a business, you're going to need to take advantage of sort of the best sources of intelligence globally. The only way to do that is if you've got sort of shared protocols, shared understanding of A, how these technically work, but B, also how do you understand what's actually happening across these things. So that to me is what I'm kind of most excited about in terms of Wayfound and AI, and just, your podcast last week made me think of kind of Moore's law with microprocessors, right? Like talking about how the individual LLMs seem to be slowing in their pace of growth and sort of raw intelligence. That may or may not happen. Kind of seems like it a little bit. This is very similar to CPUs, right? Where we just went parallel, right? So CPUs sort of physically bound at a certain gigahertz speed, whatever. Well, what do? You just create like a network, multi-threading, data centers, right? Problem solved. So I think it's going to be essentially the same thing, where we're just global intelligence from these systems will continue apace because we can network.
That makes sense. Perfect analogy. Go ahead, Tatiana.
I would just completely underline what Chad said, which is this is going to be like electricity. Just think about the revolution when electricity, permeated into our homes and into our companies and into, the world. We cannot even imagine the transformations that are going to happen when we have intelligence everywhere, permeating our lives and our workplaces. And, we do need standards, and we do need an openness and interoperability and interoperable communication. And again, Wayfound is not in a particular vertical use case, right? We are happy to play and really welcoming, right? Partnering with other AI agent platforms because we do want to kind of open up and speed up the adoption of intelligence around the world in a trusted way. Our motto is trust in intelligence, right? That's what we're creating. And we're, just ping me or Chad on LinkedIn if you'd like to join the Open Agent Alliance and work with us to get intelligence as broadly adopted into workplaces as possible, as quickly as possible.
Absolutely. That is my mission as well. And that's why we're here doing what we do. So Tatiana and Chad, thank you so much for spending this time with me to bring me up to speed with what you're working on and sharing your work with the world. And yeah, I mean, you guys are solving such critical, hard problems, laying the groundwork for it. So much of what we talk about, just taking a step back, feels like science fiction. We're talking about building global agent intelligence networks, and it's like, this is actually what we're doing. So this is such an exciting time. So thank you guys so much, and I will talk to you guys again soon in the future. Take care.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, David.